Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mika Rübsam and you're watching Top News. Our top story for the day is that in the last 2 years, the viewership of the National Football League in pay TV has decreased, as you can see in this statistic. Our outside correspondent, Kathy Izunga, has two of the main investigators who worked on this problem to get more insight at this topic. We are now switching live to Kathy Izunga. Kathy, a very good morning to you.
Thank you, Mika. As you already mentioned, I have two of the main investigators of the research group Dynamic Drillers, Lina Gunterman and Ramtin Sedikpour, with me. The Dynamic Drillers is a group of 10 students investigating the National Football League. Hello, nice to have you here.
Hello, Kathy. It's our pleasure.
So as Mika already mentioned, the viewership of the National Football League has decreased in pay TV. We already looked at some statistics to prove that. But before we talk about this topic, let's first talk about the National Football League in general.
Alright, so the NFL is one of the most popular sports organizations worldwide. There are basically 32 teams which are split in two conferences, the National Football Conference and the American Football Conference. The NFL is to this day the most famous sport in the US, but they have a lot of fans in Germany, United Kingdom, Brazil as well, so very known all around the world.
Right. And there are very big companies which are supplying the NFL and its teams with different kind of products like the merchandise and the gear. The two biggest ones are Nike and Gatorade. And as you can imagine, there's big money rolling around this market. So the revenue in 2017 was approximately 14 billion US dollars. And the market is just keep growing, right?
Exactly. So we are talking about a realistic growth of 25 billion US dollars in the next 10 years.
Whoa, very interesting. But why do you think that the NFL has been so successful?
Well, the organization is always looking forward to satisfy the end consumer. In this case, the fans which are watching and following the games through free TV, pay TV, streaming services or through stadium visits. They are always looking for opportunities to achieve more fans. For example, there was a big investment in 2010 where the NFL invested over 10 million US dollars into a campaign to integrate women in the sport, which was a huge success, and nowadays over 40% of the audience are women.
So, what can you tell us so that we can understand this market better?
To understand the macro environment of this market better, we can have a look at the pestle analysis that we did.
Pestle. For our viewers at home, can we just take a second to look at what the pestle means and what it exactly does?
Yes, of course. So a pestle analysis is a tool used by marketers to analyze and monitor the macro environmental factors that have an impact on organizations. So it actually stands for political, economical, social, technological, environmental, and legal.
Okay.
So I will start with the political part. So as we all know, Donald Trump has been the president of the United States for 2 years now.
Yeah.
And with him as a president, the National Football League got into some issues, you could say. So,
They did.
Yeah. So in 2016, Colin Kaepernick, a former NFL quarterback, started a movement because he wanted to protest against police brutality and racism in the United States. So he started this movement, which you can actually, which was named under the hashtag Take a Knee, because he started kneeling down during the national anthem, and a lot of other football players actually followed. So it got into a huge movement.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump saw this as a resistance against the United States because he thinks that everyone who is proud of their country should actually stand up for their country and stand up for the national anthem. So usually it's a big tradition, a long-standing tradition, that the Super Bowl winners get invited into the White House from the president, but Donald Trump actually uninvited the Philadelphia Eagles. In 2017. So they were not invited into the White House as like a
Tradition.
So now there's a new rule that every football player has to stand on the field during the national anthem. They need to stand up during the national anthem. Or if they do not want to stand up for the national anthem, then they have the option to stay in the dressing rooms while the national anthem is playing.
Oh, well, what can we do about it?
Right, so next I will tell you something about the economical part of the pestle analysis. And what's very interesting about that the NFL has this different revenue streams, like media, sponsorships, partnerships, and ticket sales.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, 2/3 of the National Football League's money comes from TV revenue. One reason for that is that the Super Bowl is one of the most watched sport events on TV.
Yes.
Everyone is just watching it. So also a 30-second advertisement costs about 5 million US dollars.
Whoa, these are huge numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But it's not all. I mean, sponsors like Gatorade, Visa, FedEx, and a lot more spent over 1.3 billion US dollars in the season 2017 and 18. Yeah.
Exactly. So in regards to the social part of the pest analysis, women are actually getting more and more involved into the sports,
Oh, they are.
as I earlier mentioned.
Wow.
Yeah. And also fans integrate the NFL as a form of product like merchandise and sweaters into their lives. And also the fan bases of the teams are expanding even outside of the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I already mentioned, the NFL tries to keep the customer satisfied. And coming to the technological part of the pest analyzers, the NFL got some new innovations like helmet technology and field turfs. So the audio and the helmets are much improved this year by the company Gapsa and Schnackenbird's digital system.
Right. But that's still not all, because the next part is the environment. And the NFL has a big environmental program in which they show that they are committed to the environment.
And what does this environmental plan include?
Well, first of all, the National Football League has a solid waste management, which basically means they redirect waste from landfills through recycling and reuse of potential waste.
Okay.
And also, the National Football League donates leftover food and materials to soup kitchens and organizations that distribute meals to those in need.
Okay.
Yeah, right. And another big topic is the greenhouse gas reduction, which is there because in many facilities of the NFL they use like renewable energy, like wind, solar, geothermal, and even landfill gas.
Right. And it's also important to mention the reforestation station project, in which the NFL members planted several thousand tree seedings.
Wow, it sounds to me like the National Football League really cares about their environment.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, and the last part of the PES is the legal part, and this part includes like the take-a-knee policy, but we already mentioned it.
So now we really know a lot about the National Football
Yeah.
League, right? But as an investigator, you also need something like a business problem, right?
Yeah, you are right. So the business problem that we're focusing on is the decrease of the viewership of the National Football League on pay TV. For example, on the Sunday Night Football, the National Football League had 19.3 million viewers in the 2016 season. And in the following season, so in 2017, the National Football League had only 18.6 million viewers. So that's actually a decrease of 9%.
Aw.
Yeah, and that's not all. I mean, there was a decrease on the Thursday Night Football. In 2016, they had 12.4 million viewers, and it dropped in the season 2017 to 10.9 million viewers. And that's an actual decrease of 8%.
Right.
And do you guys know a reason for this decrease?
Yeah, I mean, one reason is that many viewers leave the pay TV, like ESPN and Fox Sports, and switch to streaming websites where they watch the games on the NFL.
Yeah.
And like, do you also have other questions that you're focusing on?
Yes, of course. We have sub-questions which help us to go more into our business problem.
Okay, what exactly are the sub-questions?
Some of our sub-questions are, what is the NFL doing about the decreasing pay TV viewership? And also, which trend is the one that affects the viewership the most? And then also, how did the political protests influence the viewership?
Yeah, and there's also a question like, does the decrease of the viewership impact the revenue of the NFL? And how does the NFL cooperate advertisement streaming sites?
And were you able to find an answer to these questions?
Yeah, I mean, we went on the streets and asked pedestrians some specific questions about the NFL, so...
Right, we actually have some footage with us today from our street interview.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So we will switch now to the clip of the street interview of the Dynamic Drillers, and we will be right back.
Oh, my name is Roman Pardis. I'm a member of the Dynamic Drillers. Today I'm conducting a street survey asking pedestrians questions about the National Football League. Excuse me, sir. Do you have time to answer a couple of questions? I'm from the research group Dynamic Drillers.
Yes, of course, I got time.
So, how often do you watch the games of the National Football League?
I watch all 3 days, so definitely more than once a week.
How do you usually watch the games of the NFL?
Well, I always watched on pay TV, but since the start of this season I switched to the NFL Game Pass.
And why did you switch to the NFL Pass?
I mean, it is a lot cheaper than pay TV, and besides that I can watch all the games on my notebook or even on my smartphone.
How much does sustainability in the NFL matter to you?
I mean, it is very important for myself, so if the NFL cares about it, even better.
Thank you for your time, sir. Excuse me, sir. Do you have time to answer a couple of questions? I'm from the research group Dynamic Drillers.
Yes, of course.
Have you been watching less NFL games in the last 2 years?
Actually, no.
The viewership of the NFL has decreased in the past 2 years. Why do you think that happened?
In my opinion, it's because of the political issues. I only want to watch sports, and I think politics have nothing to do with it.
Welcome back. So that was very interesting. Would you say that the street interview helps you to answer the questions of your business problem and your sub-questions?
Yeah, for sure. It was very helpful to get to know the opinions of the NFL fans.
Right. And it was really helpful for our sub-question about how the political protests influenced the viewership. It was very helpful and interesting to see what the NFL fans think about that topic, or if they even think that it
has an impact.
Exactly.
Yeah. So as an investigator, you really need to know a lot about the NFL. But are there other models that you can use aside the PESTEL for research?
Yes, of course. So besides the PESTEL, we also use the Porter's 5 forces, where we identified 5 competitive forces of the NFL.
Okay. Could you give us an explanation of the Porter's 5 forces and what it is?
Yeah, sure. So the Porter's 5 forces is a business analysis model that helps to explain why different industries are able to sustain different levels of profitability. So the forces are frequently used to measure competition intensity, attractiveness, and profitability of an industry or market, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So the Porter's 5 forces starts with the competitive rivalry. So we blend now your statistic in where you can see the numbers and strengths of the competitors of the NFL. So first, the first competitors like the major baseball league, it's the MLB. Then comes the National Basketball Association, the NBA, and the Major League Soccer, it's the MLS, and the National Hockey League, it's the NHL. But as you can see, the NBA, the National Basketball League, is the biggest competitor of the NFL. Right?
Okay.
Right. And on the next statistic, you can see the average attendance of these leagues. And also here you can see that the NFL has the highest number. And after that, there comes the NBA.
Yeah, okay.
So the next part of the Porter's 5 forces that we investigated is the supplier power.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, right. And one of the suppliers of the NFL is actually Nike. And Nike is the main supplier for the players' equipment till 2020. The most important supplier is Gatorade, though.
Okay.
And as the #1 sport in the United States, the NFL has a huge market.
Right.
Yeah.
So an important question is, who are the buyers and do they have a high or low buying power? Yeah. And to clarify who the buyer actually are, they are all of the fans and customers who buying merchandise from the NFL shop, going in the stadiums, buying tickets and beverages.
So as you can see in the statistics, the average ticket price from the NFL from 2006 to 2018 increased steadily. The next statistic actually shows that the NFL customer have a very low buying power. The fans can't really influence the price, and they cannot drive the prices down either.
Okay.
Yeah, now I will come to the threat of substitution. The NFL gained so much power in the recent years that it's nearly impossible to enter the market for competitors, right, Lina?
Yeah, right, exactly. The NFL fans have such a strong barrier that it often gets accused for being a monopoly.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And it went actually so far that in 2009, a former supplier of the NFL, the American Needle Inclusion, sued the NFL for being a monopoly.
Oh yes, I heard that. Yeah, that's so true.
So the last part of the Porter's 5 forces is the threat of new entry. So when deciding whether a market has a low threat of new entrants or a high threat of new entrants, the following factors must be taken into account. So for once, if the market in today's industries has a high brand loyalty and the brand names are known, the market has a low threat of new entrants. In addition to that, the market has a high initial investment and little to no access to distribution channels and suppliers.
Okay.
So a low threat of new entrants is also recognizable by strong government regulations and with no danger of retaliation. Furthermore, property technology is required to be successful, and there is a risk of retaliation from existing competitors. If all these factors are reversed,
Yeah.
there is a high threat of new entrants.
Okay. So Ramtin, would you say that the NFL has a high threat or a low threat of new entrants?
Yeah, I mean, according to these factors, the NFL has a low threat of new entrants.
Okay. Okay, so we have come to the end. Like, do you guys have a conclusion that you can give us?
Yeah, sure. We want to conclude this with a best and worst case scenario. Lina, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So the worst case scenario for the National Football League could be that they would lose contracts with all the different streaming channels. And also, this would mean they would lose approximately like $5 billion US dollars. So we're talking about huge amounts of money, as you can see. And then also, it could be that with time goes on, the National Basketball Association could get more fans than the NFL. So that would not be so good for them as well.
Yeah.
And but for the best case scenario, would you like to say something?
Yeah, sure. So the best case scenario would be if the NFL finds a connector for pay TV further in the media trend. And yeah, so the viewership would increase and the revenue would automatically either increase.
Increase, so okay. So after doing all this research, would you advise investors to invest in the National Football League?
Yeah,
Definitely.
we definitely think they should invest. I mean, everyone can be an investor and invest into the National Football League if they want to. But in our research, we actually focused on advertising companies who are investing money into advertising during the National Football League's games on TV. And even though the pay TV viewership is decreasing, we have mentioned that it's not the total viewership that is decreasing. They're just switching channels. So it's still very profitable and the revenue is still going up. So it would be a very
good investment still,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Yeah. So thank you guys for the interview. I think it was very interesting and the information for our viewers and I will personally invest in the National Football League and I think that most of us are convinced as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Kathy.
you.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah.
So thank you and Mika, back to you.
Thank you, Kathy. This was very interesting. I'm Mika Rübser and this was Top News.